A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know we are between you guys and beer, so we'll do our thing and let you get out of here as soon as possible. And this thing works. So, I'm Jeff Vrieling. I'm from Jamf. I work out of our Amsterdam office, which is in the Netherlands. I work in our pro service team.
My name is Isaac Ordonez. I'm from San Francisco. I'm a consultant at Men Consulting. We work primarily with startups and a lot of kind of high-tech companies that are mostly Mac in the sub 1,000 range.
Good, and I work with a lot of clients whom I cannot speak about, sorry. Something to do with confidentiality. Anyway, so today we will be talking about the reason why you all came here or watching this at home. We will be talking about the automated certificate deployment with Jamf and the Symantec managed PKI. Going through the agenda, what we will be talking about today is a little bit the goals, why we are doing that, and the certificates involved. We will be talking about the services. We're going to guide you through the configuration, and lastly, we will be doing a bit of a demo of the end result. Now, because we are in a big hotel, the hotel staff didn't really appreciate us coming in here with our own Wi-Fi kit and spinning up an SSID and going absolutely mental on that. So unfortunately, you will need to be doing that with the videos on the screens.
There's going to be a lot of information here. Review it later. There's a lot of videos. So our goals with certificates were to provide our users with a method of authentication to Wi-Fi, to VPN, to the Ethernet, without needing passwords. We're not relying on them to choose a weak password. We also wanted to require that devices were an MDM, make it so that they cannot do their work unless they are an MDM, so that we can lock them out of various services. Next one. Monthly. Another goal. I'm in San Francisco. We don't have servers. No one wants to set up a server. So we need a lower IT overhead. And we want that security to be patched by the vendor. Another thing that we needed was not hiring somebody who had expertise in PKI to set up and manage a PKI instance.
So, with that, we came to the solution of certificates. Now, not all of you are probably as familiar with certificates as the others, so we're going to do a bit of a step back. So why certificates? Well, in general, they are more secure than passwords. I mean, we all know the situation where people have a Wi-Fi password and pretty much all of the organizations, their mothers, daughters, and children know that password of your organization, which is bad. Hence the certificate solution. Certificates are in basics more similar to a passport, so they got a lot of similarities, and we're going to be talking about some of these similarities in just a second. Certificates can be issued to a user or a device. They are not exportable, if you do your work right, and they take roughly about 6.4 quadrillion years to crack, and that is with an asterisk because that is with the computing power of today. Maybe tomorrow it's going to be different, who knows. So, as I said, certificates have similarities to a passport. This is one of the example passports that the country of Peru publicizes. So this is not one of ours. So we are actually able to use that. So what you can see on the screen, there we go. So what you can see, if we look at the passport page itself, we share a lot of similarities. So we see the name, which on a certificate is comparable to, well, the name actually. We can see the issuer, in this case, the country of Peru. We can see the serial number. We also see that on a passport. That helps us identify and make sure that there is only one of them. Also, we see the expiration date. That's, again, very key as well, just to make sure that you don't gonna be traveling around with an expired thing, because that doesn't guarantee your identity. Now, this is how it roughly works in the IT world. I'm just going to go into the... You got your license on you by any chance?
I do.
Good. So, who are you?
My name's Isaac.
Good. I'm going to have...
That's some proof of that.
All right. So, For the people who cannot see this, because I can imagine this is quite far away, I'm looking here at a driver's license. This thing is issued by the state of California. By the looks of it, it's real. It's got some marks. And if we take this into the, thank you, Isaac. If we take this into the world of certificates, that's roughly what we do on a day-to-day basis. So we use those proof of identification to check who he is, so if it's still valid, and who was the issuer. So that's just a little bit of a step back, again, for people who are not that familiar with the certificate matter. Now we're going to do a little bit of a step forward. So we're going to be talking about the services that we are going to work with today. First of all, the Symantec managed PKI, and we got DigiCerts between brackets because they got acquired by DigiCert. Before we're going to go into this, there's just a quick remark that I want to make to avoid Q&A at the end. Apple has distrusted some of the Symantec certificates. This is not the case in this workflow, so this has nothing to do with that. We're golden on that. So when we look at the Symantec managed PKI solution, it's a turnkey hosted PKI service. That means you don't need to do anything other than clicking the sign up button and off you go. It costs roughly between $6 to $9 per device per year, so it's relatively cheap. There's a setup fee for about $2,000, and the greatest thing of all is the support is built right into your Jamf Pro. The other part that we're going to be looking at today is a RADIUS server. Now, RADIUS is actually an abbreviation for those of you who were not aware. RADIUS stands for Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service. What it does a couple of things. It does authentication, authorization, and accounting. You can use them on both Wi-Fi, Ethernet, for VPN services, and many, many other things. It's considered to be nowadays the industry standard, and yeah, one of the examples that we have here in the playbook is Foxpass, FreeRADIUS. Some of you may be familiar with the MPS solution from Microsoft, and there are many, many other things, but they all basically do the same thing. Today, we will be focusing on the first one in the list. It is Foxpass.
Again, in San Francisco, and a lot of this project, when it originally came up, was no servers. So we had to look for a hosted RADIUS solution that would hook into authentication services like Okta or Google, but also support TLS authentication from the certificates. So in this case, we're actually getting, does the user exist from Okta? But instead of a password, we're using the certificate as the authentication method. So if the user is revoked, we're able to, in Okta, we're able to then just ignore the certificate part. They accept certificates for authentication. They work with a number of vendors. Cost varies depending on how many licenses you have.
Yeah.
Another thing that we wanted to look at for this was HTTPS client authentication. We wanted to hide websites behind a certificate from the client side as well. So in a standard HTTPS handshake, you validate the server, but the server doesn't care who you are. So in this case, what we're doing is we're actually having the server care who you are.
All right, so that's awesome. And that's the theory. So now we're going to be talking a little bit about the configuration. So in order to do that, we actually made a couple of videos to show you how you could go about in doing this. It all starts basically by going to the Symantec, or now DigiCert website, and signing up for their trial or test account, as they call it. It's valid for about 90 days. And what we'll be going here about is how you set it up and how you could get access to it, assuming you did the first part. Just a heads up, you will be seeing in the video that we will be focusing primarily on Chrome, because that works best. So what will happen is, again, this is the Symantec website that we will be seeing, and once you've signed up, you will be presented with a lovely email and a link that you will need to follow. Once you follow that, you will be able to download the add-in from their website, which is it's just a standard PKG that people in the industry use nowadays. You're gonna just go about installing this like you would normally do that. And again, emphasis on the Chrome part. Please don't do this in Safari or Firefox. This just doesn't work as good as it should. So once you're done, that's the first part. Next up is we're going to be configuring the Symantec instance. So we only retrieved the client. Next up is we're going to actually configure the instance itself. How are we going to be doing that? Well, we're going to be installing the administrator certificate first. And then we're going to fix some private key issues. And we need to be doing that in Keychain. So again, going back to our demo, what you have in that same email, once you did that, you have another link. And that's going to allow you to install the administrator certificate. During this process, you will be needing to set a PIN. You can basically make up anything. That will be the PIN for the keychain that it will install a little bit later. All right, so we're going to keep on going at this stage. Enter your password a couple of times as is required. And once we're done, we actually have the certificate installed. But we're not done yet. No. Just to make sure that to show you why we have to do some issues. So if you go to the link straight off the bat, it just won't work. You see, we are being prompted to select the certificate that we installed, but again, it just doesn't work because we need to fix a few issues. So open up the keychain that you can find on any Mac. You go to the appropriate keychain that the system installs, and you're going to go to the private key. And what we are needing to do is need to flip the switch. Go ahead and save it, and that is pretty much it. Now, the moment you refresh, or rather just open a new tab and put the link in there, again, we are being asked for which certificate do we want to prove our identity with. And there we go. We get now access to our, in this case, 90-day free trial test period, if your organization does not already have a proper one.
So now that we have a Symantec instance set up, what we're going to do is we're going to configure it and prep it to talk to Jamf Pro and have Jamf Pro talk to it to issue certificates. We're going to create a certificate profile, which is kind of a skeleton of what your certificates will look like when they are created. We're going to download some CA files, and then we're going to hook up Jamf. Okay. So first, you'll notice we're in the PKI portal. We're going to add a new certificate profile. You have to do this before you hook up to Jamf, otherwise Jamf will fail to connect to it. The other thing that you have to do is you have to choose the type MDM Web Services Client. This is the certificate profile type that will work. Once you've clicked Continue, you're going to be presented with a couple options. First off, you have the set at the top that you can't change, but you can also add more fields into the certificate, and we can actually link data from Jamf into the certificate. So if you want to put the organization of the person, computer serial number, all of this information can be added in. Validity, we can go up to 3 years. With the trial, only 30 days, so ignore that part. But you can also set the key size and a couple other informations. We do want to allow duplicates because the device will accidentally regenerate multiple copies for itself. It's a known issue. Once we're done, we give this a name, so remember, I like to do Mac OS and iOS separately so that I have two profiles for each of them. Once the profile is saved, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into the Managed CAs, and we're going to download the certificate authority that you own, the CA file, the public CA file. It's a little hard to see which one it is here. In the non-test drive version, it'll say your company's name. You're going to give that to Foxpass, and you're going to install that on your devices so that they trust this Symantec CA. If you hover the mouse over, you can actually see the full name. It's
magic.
Magic. So now we're going to go into Jamf, and what we're going to do is we're going to go into Settings, and we're going to go to PKI Certificates, and there's an Add button in the upper right-hand corner to configure a new certificate authority. And Symantec is listed here. And what we're doing is similar to most other setups with Jamf, is we're going to get a CSR, we're going to take that CSR, we're going to give that certificate signing request to Symantec. And once Symantec has it, they're going to generate a certificate on their end for this server, and they're going to give it back to us. So we get this file, just like VPP and DEP, we download the file, and we're going to put that file back into Jamf, and our trust will be complete. One thing about the file that they give you, you cannot upload it. You have to paste the actual contents of it, so open it up in Terminal or something that is not going to change the formatting. copy and paste it there. Make sure that you don't grab, for example, your username. You'll see the end certificate, begin certificate lines. And complete. So now, Jamf knows about Symantec. Symantec trusts Jamf. Jamf can issue certificates in Symantec. So step one is ready. You can add this to the Jamf dashboard if you want to see how many certificates you have. It's pretty much useless information to sit and stare at, though. Next. So next up, what we're going to do is configure Foxpass. The steps aren't shown here, but basically, I fired off an email to Foxpass saying, here's my root CA. Will you please have your Radius server trust it? They fired back an email saying, here's our server certificate. Will you please have your clients trust it? And then we are going to configure Foxpass and Meraki to trust each other, and Meraki to accept WPA2 Enterprise Certificate Authentication. So in the Foxpass admin console here, you'll see we have a couple users, me and Dave. You also see that we have an option for Radius client. So we're going to add a Radius client. Now a Radius client is your network. It's your access point. It's the public IP that these requests will come from. So this will usually be your office's external IP address here. You also have a Radius secret, and that Radius secret will be used in Meraki to authenticate to the Radius server. The Radius server will only accept connections from this IP, and will only accept them when they have this passcode. Next up, in Meraki, we're setting up a WPA2 Enterprise network, setting the secret, using the IP address that Foxpass provided for the server. And then you can choose whatever settings you want for how your SSID should be configured, the name, your bands. From there, complete.
Excellent. So that's the Wi-Fi part of the thing. Now remember, we spoke about the other different option, how you could use this. You could also use this for website authentication. Just basically allow people only with a valid certificate to access a resource. In order to do that, I just want to quickly highlight the Apache configuration. So in this section, the key item here is the SSL verify depth. There are a couple of different levels that you can set this to. And the other thing that we need to do here is we need to include the SSL CA certificate from the Symantec. You may or may not need to convert that to a PAM file. So that's that out of the way. Now we're going to carry on with the actually the work that we have to do on Jamf Pro. So what we'll be doing is we're going to create a configuration profile that's going to tell the client to obtain a certificate from the Symantec CA. It's going to have the Radius certificates in there as well. We also need to do some client mappings there in order to make sure that it's good. And lastly, we are going to create a Wi-Fi payload. That Wi-Fi payload is actually going to make sure that it's going to use that certificate which it retrieved in the earlier step to prove its identity with the SSID and the controller. So, first of all, we're going to go back into the Symantec, and we're highlighting here the identifier here. Now that identifier is especially important if you got multiple of these things going. We're going to carry on doing a new configuration profile. This will be a user level profile that we are going to deploy. We are going to go to certificates, click configure, and what you will do there is you give the name. So in this case, we choose Symantec client. You're going to select from the drop-down menu the Symantec server, and here again we validate that we got the right thing. We got a couple of different mappings that we can select. The more mappings you can select, the securer it is. In this case, these are all the mappings also that we set up earlier in the template. Once we're done with that, we're not done yet, so we have to add the CA certificates as well. Otherwise, your client won't trust either Symantec or the Foxpass. So in this step, what we will be doing is we will be adding the Foxpass CA itself first. Oh no, we don't. We're going to be adding the Symantec CA first. Doesn't really matter in which order you do this, as long as they're all there. That's basically the thing, because these profiles are so quick that the moment that they apply, it's all going to be fine anyway. And yeah, lastly, we're going to do the Foxpass Radius server certificate. Just to make sure that your client's actually going to trust the Radius server. Almost done. So this is the certificate part. Next up, we're going to go to the Wi-Fi part, and we're going to actually configure that accordingly, depending on the settings of your controller. So what we did in Meraki, we have a test network called JNUC test. We're going to select the WPA2 Enterprise. In this case, we're going to go with TLS. Scroll down a little bit more, and what you can do is have a username. In this case, we're using the username field out of the Jamf, and we're using a payload variable for that in order to get that data from the inventory record as well. Almost done. The video went a little bit quicker, but what you do then is you select the certificate that it obtained earlier as an identification certificate, and under trust, you go ahead and select the 2 appropriate CAs as well. So it's actually kind of important, otherwise the whole thing doesn't trust each other and it won't work. All right, so as you saw, we are using a payload variable in there. We use $mail in this case as our username. So in the next step, we actually want to make sure that on the systems that we are deploying that we have those fields figured out, otherwise it just won't work. We're going to see failure messages. So how we're going to do that? First of all, just making sure in this case that the username field in this case is mapped to the email address, what we can see here. And we're just going to go and create a smart computer group with that particular criteria. Just to validate, we already did that, but you can see in the video how that has been created, and we validated that we have our machine in well. On the configuration profile, what we are going to do is we're going to add the appropriate scope, and we're going to add our smart group to the scope. Lastly, we're going to save, and that's pretty much it on the configuration profile thing. If you do this in test, I'm not sure if you noticed this, but I noticed this takes a little bit for it to apply because that's just the magic of all of the systems talking to each other. And don't be afraid that it can take, I've seen this at least take about 30 seconds or so for that the whole thing reports back that everything is in good order. So just keep that in mind. Don't expect the instant magic that people are used to when working with configuration profiles. It just takes a little bit longer, so keep that in mind.
The other thing to keep in mind is because we're validating the certificate, it may not be valid for up to 15 minutes. So you may fail connecting to Wi-Fi immediately. Maybe go get a cup of coffee instead of trying to figure out what you did wrong. So we're going to do a little demo of what we've all put together, and now we're actually going to take that and show you what it looks like when a client receives a certificate and when it uses that certificate versus when it doesn't. So here we have the profiles pane in the system preferences. We can see the payload with the certificates that we defined, including the one that was generated for this computer. Bunch of information on them, and then also we have the SSID. And you can also see here that we're doing ETLS instead of TTLS. On the Jamf side, we can look at the inventory for this computer, and we can also see that the certificate is installed. And we can also see the serial number for it and other information about it, so we know that it's installed from Jamf. We can also click on it, and since Jamf is talking to Symantec, it has full information about the certificate. Next up, we can jump into Symantec, and we can view the valid certificates here as well. So this is another way to see the certificate. Here we can revoke or suspend the certificate if we want to block that device from accessing any of our resources. Lastly, the keychain on the machine. Yeah, it does allow us to drag and drop the certificate out, but if you try and drag the private key out, it just gives you the certificate. And if you actually try and export the key file, what you're going to get is an error because we're installing the certificate with a no exportable flag in it. Now, there probably are ways to work around this since you actually have access to the keychain file, but this stops your standard users from somehow taking this and moving it to another machine easily. You'd have to have somebody with some pretty good knowledge of the keychain and encryption. If we double click on the certificate file here, you can see all the information, including all the mappings. You will note that online certificate status protocol is enabled. That means Foxpass, when it gets the certificate, actually checks with Symantec first and says, is this still valid? Do you still trust this? So that if you revoke it, it's instantly disconnected. So next on the demo, we're going to connect to Wi-Fi. We're going to see that the connection's automatic. We're going to review the logs in Meraki and Foxpass so you can you know where to look if you're having issues, and also know to look where you're having successes. So on this computer, I am on an SSID called Lots of Love, and I changed to JNUC test. It takes a little bit longer to connect than standard WPA2 because we're going out to the cloud. But you'll notice that we have WPA2 Enterprise connection, and we got internet. Looking at the Meraki side, we can look in the event log for the access points. And what we can see here is we can see the association attempts, and we can also see that they were successes. So this is one of the areas that you can go and troubleshoot to see, did Meraki get the certificate, and did it recognize it? If you see that Meraki got it, maybe it got a bad response from Foxpass, you can then jump into the Foxpass side of things and take a look at the radius logs. And as you see here, I connected to JNUC test with a success. I may have a failure here. And there may be more information that Foxpass can provide as well in the troubleshooting process. They were very helpful, and this took months to figure out because it wasn't documented on anyone's side.
Yeah, so that's the Wi-Fi thing of the Wi-Fi side of the demo. We also have the HTTPS side of the demo. So first of all, what happens if you try to go to a resource, in this case a website, without a certificate, if the handshake fails? This. Probably all seen this. User's gonna be very angry. Doesn't work. On the other side of the fence, this is what happens when it does work. If it does have a valid certificate and it is able to get to the resource appropriately. So this is where we go. Again, we are prompted to select the right certificate to prove our identity. Again, we can check a lot of these parameters here. And there you go. It works. Now that was on Chrome. It's not limited to Chrome. It also works on Safari. Excellent. It just works.
That page is actually still live right now, so
is it?
I can see it and you guys can't. Basically what was happening there was the server was asking the client who they were and then just stopped talking to them completely once they weren't able to provide the information. Now you know how to set this up. Pretty well detailed in a screencast. Where do you go? Go to foxpass.com. You can sign up for trial there. Symantec's managed PKI service. There is a trial sign-up link there as well. Talk to Jamf about, I'm assuming you all have it already, but talk to Jamf about setting up a trial if you don't have it already. Next, maybe you don't want to set it up or you're stuck. We can help you. Jamf can help you. You can find us in Slack on Mac admins.
Yeah, just a final note, if you guys do decide to test this, do this on your testing instance, not your production instance. We've all seen those things go horribly wrong, and again, can't say it enough. So, with that, thank you all for your attention.
Yeah, please, if you have a question, we've still got about 15 minutes left. Feel free to come up, use the microphones, got a couple already, and we'll go from there.
So when I was looking at how the certificates were scoped, it looked like you guys were just trusting what the username was to assign the right certificate. Is that correct?
We were using the user information that we had defined in Jamf. In this case, when a user enrolls their machine, they have to log into their LDAP.
Right.
That machine then gets tied to that user. So we're saying this user now has a certificate with that username because they logged into LDAP to enroll their machine.
Okay, but what if someone, say you're using local user accounts on a machine?
We're taking it from the user information field in the Jamf Pro instance. We use the $email variable once. It's because Jamf was having issues where if we left that blank, it would not send the profile out. But that data is not actually used. It's the data in the certificate itself.
Right, but I'm saying to actually send that profile down to the machine.
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys scoping that?
We're scoping it based off of the owner of the computer.
Right. What if someone changes the owner of the computer?
They'd have to be a Jamf admin to change the owner of the computer in the Jamf console, right? They'd have to update their computer record.
Okay.
So they'd have to go to the inventory, user and location, change the owner information there.
Okay. But if someone did that, what would happen?
It would then it would issue a certificate with the CN of the next person, of whoever they change that to.
Okay. So it would, at that point, it would stop trying to send a certificate for that person who originally owned it, and it would send an updated certificate for the new person?
You'd have to reissue. It would still retain the original one at first. You'd have to basically rescope it,
Okay.
have the config profile, remove it, and then add it back in. And at that point, when the Jamf server talked to Symantec, it would regenerate it.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
So that that all comes down to, if you guys are using DEP, please use authentication.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah. So say hello to Jordan Cow
Will
back
do.
in Amsterdam. Quick question to you guys. I like the simplicity of being all certificate based. My next question would be, can that be extended to email SMIMEs first? And the other question is, what are the alternatives for Meraki?
I'm sorry, what was the second half?
Alternatives for the Meraki?
So on the SMIME side, we didn't research it, so I can't give you an answer there. Alternatives to Meraki, anything that supports Radius. We are just handing off to Foxpass, and Foxpass is ultimately deciding whether the certificate is valid and whether the user is valid as well. So it's a thumbs up, thumbs down back through Radius.
So at my home lab, I've done this as well with just the standard Airport Express, where you Airport Extreme, sorry, where you define your Radius server, anything that I can hand off. All right, 3 o'clock, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you for attending JNUC.
Thank you, guys.